Okay, so we are at the top of the hour. I'm going to go ahead and kick this off. Those folks that jump in, welcome. This is being recorded, so we're happy to share this afterwards. I'm Kimberly Kaler, president of AOE, and if AOE is new to you, we are a association management service company. We also provide consulting services ranging from event planning to marketing. And I'm joined today by Jenna Fullenkamp, whom I've known for a long time. She actually started her career with us. And Jenna has a lengthy list of experience in marketing, ranging from starting as an intern with us, what, 15 years ago? I don't want to out you on your age, but that's probably not right. And you were working for us and building her expertise related to marketing with design, construction firms, special interests in the concrete industry. And then she's also had a lot of experience working on the consumer side, from BMW to Mini Cooper, also a Royal Building Products, and now works for a IT service solution company. I'll let her talk a little bit more about that. So I asked Jenna to join us today just to do a quick 20-minute discussion related to sales. Sales is something that can be scary for all of us. I know it is for me, especially the idea of cold calling. And, you know, unless you really love cold calling, it's even harder to do during the pandemic. So we wanted to just have a quick discussion. We will be off the phone in 20 minutes here, related to what sales looks like after the pandemic. So Jenna, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Kimberly. Excited to be here with the audience and back with Building Products, and obviously the associations that I grew to love when interning with you. So thank you for having me.
Yep, wonderful. So talk a little bit, maybe give a couple sentence introduction to your role in your company, and then what does sales look like pre-pandemic? Because I know you were in a sales role and you actually do sales calls, cold calling, et cetera, the sales cycle. And then how has it shifted through the pandemic, and what are you doing now?
So being on the consumer side in technology is something that is obviously growing and changing our everyday lives as well as the organizations that we work for. So coming into 2019, there really was a consistent outlook to the full year. Things are looking really positive for the technology industry overall because we work with all industries, all silos, and all markets. Coming into the year when COVID-19 and the pandemic came around the curve, things completely stopped. And it was interesting because some of our clients and the markets were definitely abreast of what was coming. They were preparing, they were sitting and having those pandemic conversations ahead of time, and some were taken by complete surprise. So for April and May, things stopped. And then we started to see people saying, we need to get our employees home. We need them to be secure because we are in the market of IT products, and that's what we do. So we helped people and organizations get their employees home. We got them working safely and with the materials that they needed. And it was interesting because everything that stopped, once June, July, August, and now September have hit, we are almost back to normal and have caught up to the downfall that we saw in May and April. So it's been an interesting transition, and seemingly as the technology has shifted throughout the year, we're obviously seeing a shift now as people are going back into the office. As I'm sure construction architecture firms are seeing as well, they're being tasked with different needs. I was just reading an article in the Wall Street Journal last night, and it was very interesting that it talked about the dynamic workplace, they called it. So as organizations start to go back to the office, they're looking at redoing infrastructure to less open space, creating soundproof pods, having wireless device charging. It's really the idea of trying to get people to come back to the office because they've enjoyed their work from home. Now, I know some of us are antsy and we want to get back to the office, but there's also, it's, you know, being looked at differently. And again, the Wall Street Journal called it dynamic workplace, in that it's how do we get people to want to come back to work, come back to the office?
Very interesting. Yeah, and I know that some of the folks that are on the phone today fall into the camp where their offices are, everybody's working from home, some continued operations, but it still is this changing workforce. What did sales look like for you? You said that things halted and then they picked back up, and I imagine a lot of the sales efforts you had this summer were maybe not planned sales. It was folks that really needed your help because of the switch to work from home. But are you making cold calls? What does that look like right now? How do you pick up the phone and mine and help somebody along the sales cycle when you used to be able to take them for lunch, for example, or stop by their office?
Well, it's funny to use the word cold call because they're so much warmer these days. I think with everyone going through the pandemic globally, nationally, all at the same time, even if your business wasn't impacted in the sense that you were working from home, everybody had some sort of personal connection to what was occurring. So a cold call, people wanted to pick up and just have a conversation. People wanted to, be empathetic and really just communicate. So making cold calls has been and was actually easier, as odd as that sounds, because people wanted that personal connection.
Are you nervous at all about calling somebody out of the blue like you would on a sales call maybe, and they don't know who you are yet, and especially in the early months of, hey, why are you bugging me with this right now? I'm just trying to figure out how to get my people still working or keep things moving. I assume some of that has died down and shifted because we all have found our groove. Is that correct?
I think the way that we always look at a cold call, and I'm sure everyone does, you have to make it relevant to the person you're calling. So that's the scary part of a cold call, is picking up the phone and not knowing who you're calling. So the preemptive and proactive research to who am I talking to, and maybe even a little bit of LinkedIn or Facebook research to understand, could this person potentially have kids in the background right now? Was their organization impacted financially? Could they have potentially gotten laid off and this is their cell phone? So that research ahead of time made the conversation a little bit easier, and it wasn't so scary that we might be reaching this person and they could have gotten laid off, or your call is inappropriate. That helped a lot.
And you mentioned, calling their cell phone, for example. Are you getting a hold of most people by phone, or is it email? What does that look like right now? Is it something that we've wondered as well? Are we leaving a message in a voicemail box, or even if you're mailing something, et cetera, are they even seeing it?
Well, it's funny you say that. Where we could, I'll speak to mail, where we could send something in the mail to a client, even just to touch base or a card. Most people in our industry are at home, or they're going in a couple days a week. We are in I think today, the technology of the cell phone is almost where you reach people, and it crosses a line, which is starting to blur. But a lot of times I won't leave a voicemail. I will make the phone call and send a text and say, hey, this is Jenna with IQSG. I was reaching out because of A, B, and C. A lot of people don't listen to their voicemails, or their voicemails are full. So I'm interested too, what you see, Kimberly. Texting was always such a personal thing, and we are seeing that line blurred a lot these days.
That's interesting that you mention it. I mean, my mind immediately said that if I got a sales call and somebody texted me and I didn't know who they were, I'd feel a little invaded, if you will. Though I understand that it's probably becoming more common. I have no problem with somebody texting me if I know them. So I think that perspective that you have is really interesting. I wonder if it's generational too, kind of having permission to text, if you will. So that's fascinating to me. What about changes that you did in terms of marketing content, sales, anything? How did you shift what your message is to make sure you were getting in front of folks? If you weren't knocking on doors?
We made two large shifts right out of the gate. We knew that we needed to change a channel, so we actually moved our website to an e-commerce storefront. So that way our clients, when they were at home, if they needed additional monitors or something simple that normally our organization doesn't tout or sell strategically, we created an online storefront so they could access wireless home networks, computers, monitors, things of that nature. So the two shifts were creating an e-commerce storefront, and the second shift that we made from a product standpoint and marketing was, okay, what in our portfolio right now is more imperative that we need to educate ourselves more deeply? Again, it may not have been as imperative 3 months ago, but what in our portfolio can we help people with right now? Again, to get people home, to get them working, to get them secure. So those were the two biggest shifts that we made.
Was there a training component to that as well? Because I know you're a product supplier, but you're really a service company. I mean, people are buying your products and your solutions, your technologies, knowing that you are going to provide the service with it. And that's similar to a lot of the folks that are on the phone today. How did you help them use your products and services? Was there a training component that you embarked on?
There definitely was, and this was new water for a lot of people. So we made sure to have resources available, whether that be through content, PDFs, and or through video, because another shift that I saw throughout our industry and others being on social networks is that the written word wasn't as impactful anymore. It was, and I think this goes back to being empathetic and connecting, video content was more important. So we did create some videos, again, through PowerPoints and written and or spoken word, just because we were seeing that people were relating more towards just human contact because they were stuck in their house.
So that leads us to a question related to video, and a question I get a lot, or conversations, you're already smiling on, Zoom fatigue is what most people call it. And I don't want to single out on any one platform, whether it's the WebEx meetings or Teams or Skype for Business, or, even GoToWebinar, which we're using today. Any solutions or tips for people with the burnout we have from being on our screens all the time? Any thoughts on that?
Block your calendar, block a 15-minute section or block a 30-minute section to actually make sure you get up and you take your lunch and you walk, even if it's just downstairs, because if not, your calendar will be full. You will be sitting in front of your computer the whole day, and it is truly exhausting. There is truly a fatigue that goes along with sitting in one place staring at a computer all day.
Good tips. I actually have a neighbor who shared with me recently. She works for a national retailer, and they just came up with a rule that all meetings are to be 25 minutes long or 50-minute long. And so the idea is that 25 minutes, the meeting has to shut off. People have 5 minutes to, go to the bathroom, get a drink, just stretch and move, maybe check emails. And then same with, that hour-long meeting is 50 minutes. And she says it's actually done wonders for them. So little tip for those on the phone here. Let's switch over to what does networking look like? Many of us on the phone are from associations, and we've already shifted to doing conventions and conferences in a virtual format, or planning them for the fall. Looking ahead, those meetings, networking, how do we recreate that networking session? What does it look like in your industry? Do you have any tips that work?
So I'll share a few creative ones, and many of the attendees may have already done unique things like this, but we are also seeing virtual conferences. There are a lot of kickoffs that occur in the fall, so those are going virtual. But the few neat ones that I'll share in getting a networking activity set up, we've seen some virtual happy hours where each attendee is shipped a box with either different types of wine, and then there's a sommelier that opens the virtual happy hour, or a cocktail kit is sent that can be a cocktail or a mocktail. Those are sent, and then a guest bartender comes on and teaches the attendees how to do that. So people are trying to be creative, and I can appreciate that, because like we just talked about with Zoom fatigue, just doing virtual things all day is a little bit more difficult. So those are just some creative things that I've seen to switch things up. I don't
I
know if you're.
love the Yeah, I've seen similar things. I love the ideas. I've even participated in them. I can tell you that even as an extrovert, I've had a hard time sometimes in the sessions of actually connecting with people and finding your way and getting lost. So I'm on this quest right now to really figure out how that works. I mean, I've seen some really good examples when you break off into the rooms and you've got, very pointed discussions seem to really work. I think just throwing people together like you would at a cocktail hour in a hotel and asking them, and they find their way and navigate. It's a little harder to do depending on the group in an online environment, but hopefully we'll all get a little bit better at that. So thank you for your thoughts on that. Having, being an expert in the work from home environment as well as the virtual environment, any tips you learned or maybe some surprises when the pandemic hit in terms of, your own fatigue in terms of, I've been a telecommuter for a long time and it was still an adjustment with the thought that I wasn't going into the office periodically. Anything that you experienced on a personal level as well?
The Zoom fatigue, realizing how much you were truly sitting at your desk. And this one I still have not figured out how to overcome, but there's an instant gratification desire from both the clients that we serve, and then we also have what's called managed services. So we have members who join us or who need things from us from a services standpoint. So those clients and members, when they contact myself or my team, where else are we going to be? Why aren't we sitting at our desk? So this instant gratification, even more so now, being connected to a device or to a computer, because you have that sense of, well, where else would I be if I'm not sitting at my desk? You're not going to a client session or you're not meeting with someone. It's that instant gratification I still have not figured out how to step away from, which I think is also timely in our environment right now anyways.
I think that's true. I remember, we anecdotally said a lot of comments, all of us, I think, early on of, well, why isn't he or she picking up the phone, or why aren't they there? Where else would they be? But yeah, we're talking out of both sides of our mouths as we're telling people to find balance too. Right. One of the things that I have noticed, at least on my own, when we started doing all the video calls in March and April, I did talk myself into it. I didn't love it very much in the beginning. And I've grown to really enjoy and depend on it. And I've noticed a couple of times during the last month when I've actually been on a good old-fashioned conference call without video that I've really struggled. People tend to trip over each other. We seem to have this, without the visual cues, that we don't know how to play nice and take turns talking anymore. I'm wondering if you've noticed that as well, and any tips. Are we just going to continue to move? Is the world as we know it going to be visual calls from now on?
So it's funny you say that. I've noticed the same thing happening on traditional calls, is that we don't remember how to take turns, and I'm sure everyone's seen it, and if you haven't, it'll make you laugh for the day. But there is a YouTube video of what a on the phone meeting looks like, but in person. And it's just a satire, but it's very true. And unfortunately, I have not come up with the way other than we step over each other and then take a few steps back. I do think sometimes you have to leave a tiny bit of lag when you are in a GoToMeeting or a WebEx, a Zoom, whatever platform you use, because sometimes there are delays, and especially not being on video, there is some step. So unfortunately, I don't have a true solution other than leave a few minutes between.
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon. I would never have predicted back in March that I would prefer video and insist on it in most cases when given the option. So I want to try and wrap this up. And the last question I wanted to talk about is the whole marketing versus sales. And that's something that we talk a lot about. Some of the folks on the phone have a marketing role. Many of them have a management role. And where does sales fit into marketing? Is marketing and sales a little more blurred now because of the pandemic? Are they still very different? What are your thoughts? Because I know you've held both roles during your career.
I think the most important thing in an organization is to remind the sales team or the selling aspect that they are also in marketing, because what they're saying out in the field, the experience that they're providing, that's marketing your company, whether you like it or not. And again, that's traditional marketing. That's not what we're doing to build content. That's not all the work that's being put in from the marketing team. That's just people being people. So with regards to your question, I do think there's that transition from I've been in marketing and sales. It's reminding the sales team who doesn't really understand what marketing is doing in the background that they are so important to the organization, the association's brands, and the way that they perceive themselves is truly a function of marketing. So it's arming people and helping them understand through training and again what you provide to them, because they're out on the front line, but at the end of the day, they are so important to marketing, whether positive or negative.
Awesome. Great, great, great. So I invite anyone to point in any questions you have in the question box right now. One that came in that I would like to throw your way, especially being a technology firm. What technologies do we see coming? I mean, video conferencing has been around for a while and it was slow to take off, and now it's here to stay. What else do you see and talking about in your circles?
So not to be too geeky, but all of these devices have been either at home or the children have touched them, or kids have touched them, or spouses, or even just maybe in and out of coffee shops. So the device itself could have been exposed to so many security issues. And now they're coming back into offices. So the thing that we're watching right now, and from a market perspective, or what we're seeing in the stock market skyrocket, is cybersecurity solutions when devices come back into organizations, and then also to protect those devices, because the Internet of Things and devices in general, BYOD, it's changed so much. Think of how many devices each of you have on this line. It's probably a computer, a phone, maybe a watch, maybe a tablet. There's 4 different points of security issues. So that's really what we're focused on next as people start going back into the workplace.
Awesome. And I'll do a little plug for AOE here. We actually did a webinar in August on cybersecurity. So we post all of our webinars and webinars on aoeteamwebinars.com. So quick 30-minute segment if any of you are interested in that. If there are no questions, I will wrap it up. But Jenna, is there any final thoughts that you want to share related to sales? Maybe kind of a rah-rah to get people back out there and what that looks like. I guess maybe I'd say that I've talked to some people in sales roles, and they're almost using the pandemic as an excuse to maybe not knock on doors. But you're saying, get back out there. It is appropriate. Maybe comment on that and anything else that you want to do and mention in terms of wrapping up.
Yeah, and again, we did see a dip, but things are looking forward from a technology standpoint, and I'm seeing that because my clients in multiple different industries, some in construction who have been pursuing and progressing this whole time, the financial markets, they're the ones who saw things coming quickly, but they've rebounded back up. So things are looking positive, and I truly do, from a sales standpoint, think that 2020 is going to finish well. Because of that, we're trying to talk about 2021 and look ahead as well, so we're not behind. So from a rah-rah standpoint, I think we all know that we have a passion in this life to impact people to the positive, and whatever your role is, whether it's marketing or leadership or management, you can have an impact on your employees, your members, and your clients, and just know that individually, leave knowing that you do have a positive and can have a positive impact on them.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your expertise on sales. You may have started as our intern, but I look to you as my sales mentor now, so I appreciate that. I want to thank everyone that joined us today. Do a little plug for our session in October. Longtime friend and colleague of mine, Jim Beatty, who leads the Concrete Foundations Association, is going to join me and talk about member engagement and what that looks like, moving through the pandemic and beyond. how they have shifted their association efforts. They're coming off a really amazing virtual conference in July where they used avatars and all that, and I was skeptical and I participated and it was amazing. So I think there's some really neat lessons learned. So I invite you, you guys will all get information about that. And thank you for joining today. Have a good afternoon and rest of the week.